Hello, fellow Pops. I'm Dr. F Scott Feil, and I'm bringing you a message from our sponsor at Ice Shaker. My diet's always been a little bit messed up most of my life, and I recently started trying to take back control of my health. And one of the issues my doctor pointed out was that I needed to make an increase in my protein intake. Now, I can't eat chicken breasts all day, every day, so protein shakes and powders have become a big help. Ice Shaker and its built-in removable agitator is an amazing product. They come in a bunch of sizes and colors, and you can even get inscriptions and logos on them. They're stainless steel, double wall insulated, and hold ice for 30 plus hours. If you're interested in purchasing one, you can click on the link in our show notes. Or if you're interested in selling them for your business and making commission, and let's be honest, if you're listening to the Professors of Profit Vlogcast and you can consider yourself a pop or a professor of profit, you're likely interested in selling these as a side hustle. You can click on that link in the show notes as well. Or you can reach out to me directly on social media. I'm pretty available there. I love Ice Shaker, and I'm betting you, your patients, and your clients will too. Ice Shaker, let's shake things up. Now let's start the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Professors of Profit Vlogcast. I'm your host, Dr. F Scott Feil, and I've got with me today longtime friend and associate, Dr. Will Boyd. Will's got an interesting kind of story. Started out a little bit dabbling in patient care, but quickly took a left turn at Albuquerque and ended up nowhere near patient care. So we're here to talk a little bit about that journey today. Will, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me on, F Scott. I'm excited, man. I've obviously listened to quite a few episodes, and we've been buddies for a long time. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's dive into your journey here. You graduate, right? You start doing a little bit of patient care stuff, but really digital marketing and, specifically like some lead generation stuff was on your plate. Talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So I graduated in December of 2016 from PT school. And I kind of knew around after my first clinical rotation, which would have been in 2015, I worked for my first rotation was at a small private practice, and I really opened my eyes to the business side of stuff. And I'm not really an entrepreneur by heart. Not one of the kids that like had a lemonade stand or anything like that. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. But after that first rotation, it was with one private practice owner, and he had one staff PT and an office manager. And I just remember going through that experience. I got to really see what it took to like grow that business. And I met who was at the time, I thought was like the most amazing physical therapist. It was this guy. He was just a little bit older than me. I went back to school a little bit older, and he was amazing. And I just remember asking, like, we became friends. And, by the end, I was like, is it okay if I ask you like how much you make? And he said something, it's like $70,000 something per year. And at the time I was like, but you're like the best person ever. Like, I would recommend all my family and friends to you. And I just remember he was kind of like, damn, it doesn't matter like how good you are. Just, I only get paid on like the amount of patients I see. And just kind of had this moment with all the student loan debt hanging over my head of like, wow, you could spend so much time to be so good at something and still not get compensated. That's going to help you get out of debt. Not even like become wealthy, just like get out of debt. And I look back and I get questions like, why didn't you know that ahead of time? I didn't even know what I wanted to do with my life. I was just trying to, I think hindsight, yeah, of course, it was easy to see, but I didn't know that. But anyways, long story short, how this all came about was I got frustrated. And so I started a blog, lasted all of 2 posts before I realized blogging took a lot of time. And I felt like I had nothing to share expertise wise. So I shifted to podcasting, and I started a podcast, and I started with a buddy in PT school. We were going to do interviews about what we were learning about health and wellness. And it quickly turned into me being curious of interviewing people. I wanted to learn from people like you, F Scott, or like, people at the time I was following on Twitter. That was a big place where I was at back then. And I started interviewing all these PT practice owners and people, people in the field who I just thought were really interesting. And it ended up being where I sort of realized a lot of people that I was interviewing started saying, hey, they wanted to start a podcast. They wanted to learn how to get their message out there. And this is where I kind of started to realize like, hey, the power of attention, the power of building an online community. I didn't really know at the time that it would lead to money. I just kind of like it's just something I was doing as an outlet, and it ended up being pretty successful. And it just led to this path where I remember my first sort of side hustle client. We had done a tour, not a tour, but like a visit to a prosthetics company here in Pittsburgh where I went to school. And I just remembered being like, it'd be so cool to interview people, the story of the prosthetist and the amputee. Like, how do they do that whole process? Like, what's that relationship like? Because it takes months to years to, and for a lot of times, like it's ongoing. That prosthetic is always changing based on how the amputee is changing. And so, anyways, long story short, I interviewed them and they ended up saying, "Hey, we've been wanting to do a podcast like this for a long time. Could we pay you to help us?" And so I did. I helped them. That's how I made my first $300 a month. It was just helping set up a podcast and edit a podcast. But what it taught me was there are businesses out here that want to pay to help get attention for what they're doing, whether it was for monetary purposes or just brand awareness and help. And people were willing to pay for it. And then it ended up being, well, hey, we want to run Facebook ads to get the word out. Like, do you know anything about that? And I really didn't. So I took a course. I just paid for a course online. It was by a guy named Dan Henry way back in the day on Facebook ads for entrepreneurs. And I started learning Facebook ads, and that's how I got into lead gen and eventually became kind of the bread and butter of what I've been doing now as a consultant for better part of 4 years.
Yeah, I have to thank you first off because the HET podcast was a direct derivative, as many of the podcasts were that came out around that same time, of one of your free PDF books on how to start
Oh yeah.
a podcast. That made the rounds, and a bunch of us in the PT world took it and ran with it, and a lot of good podcasts came from it. So
Yeah.
that one's still going today, and I guess now this one really is kind of like the grandbaby of that PDF. So thank you
Yeah.
for starting that and putting that information out there, and loved all of your podcasts. Those were fun. Kind of missed that, actually. You may have to revisit that a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's talk about lead generation. Like, what basic definition here? What is lead generation?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I guess the way I would put it is every business needs customers and clients, and they a lead essentially is someone who shows some kind of interest in either wanting help to become a customer or a client, or potentially could become a customer or client. So there's what we would call, there's levels to this, but we won't have to go into nuances, but you have cold leads where people who might not be aware of you, but probably could benefit from your services. You have to find those people, whether that's online or in person. And then there's warmer leads or hotter leads, which are people who are already aware of you and are actually interested in your services and are actively making a decision. But lead generation is a business owner might not know how to get leads. Let's just take it for an easy example of this podcast. Let's say if you're listening to this, F Scott wants to book guests on his podcast, right? And he says, I want to interview healthcare experts who have side hustles. Well, F Scott might not know where to find them, but there's somebody out there who's a specialist, a lead generator of going to find that list of people who would make a great fit for the podcast. That would be one source of lead generation, creating leads for F Scott for the podcast. And so might be an easy one for people to think about for the show, right? And some people might go, why doesn't F Scott just do that? A lot of business owners don't have time, they're busy, or they don't have the skill set to do it. And so that's where you can step in. And the cool thing is with lead generation, I'm sure there are a few that somehow don't, but I would argue 99.9% have to do lead generation, like in order to get customers and clients. And so it's always a need, it's always in demand. Just the way that you do it changes from time to time.
Yeah, that's really well put. And I think, I've personally talked to several people who have started digital marketing agencies, and a lot of it centers around lead generation, and have made great money doing monthly contracts with businesses, just getting them leads, right? Not even closing, not even selling, just getting people, getting the eyeballs in front, getting them to book a call, to where now it becomes up to them to kind of show them, how they're the answer and the solution, and that, hey, we can help you, come on in. I mean, it's a lucrative field for sure. I mean, it was easily one of the best money makers that I ever did. I just, like you said, I ran out of time and I couldn't clone myself. So lead generation via Facebook ads was the easiest way to clone myself.
Yep.
Um, but talk to us a little bit about like kind of the business side of that and the aspect of like, what could it look like to bring in leads and what does that look like for a company to, set
Yeah.
something like that up?
Yeah. So I think do you want to know from if someone owns a business or like, hey, if
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
start an agency?
Well, but maybe both. I mean, let's look at the customer and the client.
Yeah. So I think the probably the place to start then is, even if if you're a business and want to find someone who does lead generation, it's be helpful to know. So there's different ways of doing lead generation. And so we have what's called outbound and we have inbound. So outbound means we go send a message or put a message in front of people typically that aren't aware of us. They could be, but typically often aren't aware of us. And we try to drum up interest out of that group. And then there's inbound, which are people who have heard of us and are asking us first for help. So this might be, so a good way to think about this is outbound is if you've ever had someone cold call you, if you've ever had someone knock on your door. I don't know if you've ever had a pest control or like, I just had the other day, our cable company, right? Competitor came and knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I've got an offer for you," right? That's what we'd call outbound, meaning, hey, I am going without invitation to knock on a door, to call someone, to send an email, and try to drum up interest in what we have to offer. Whereas inbound might be, I go on Google, I'm looking for a physical therapist. I see F Scott Physical Therapy Company. They have 25,000 Google reviews, look amazing. I call the office, that's an inbound lead, meaning I didn't have to go put a message or effort in front of you for you to find me and get interested in me. And so if we do that, you have to look at agencies in different ways on what are you trying to accomplish. So for example, the outbound way, classic you would see in today's world, very little is door to door, especially if you're a local business owner. It's totally doable, but I don't really see it too often of like, hey, let me go knock on a door to see if you need physical therapy. You just have to go to a lot of doors and it's just not expected, I think. So it'd be it really could work. It just might be awkward. People might not are used to it. People are used to it for like pest control or, cable company. I think when we were kids, F Scott, I don't know if you remember the people that sell like frozen food stuff, Swanson or something.
Yeah.
They would come around and like, I can't remember what the name of the brand was, but typically what you see today are either cold emails, cold calls, or sending social media messages. So DMs via Facebook, Instagram, or whatever. I think what's really interesting, a lot of people see it as spam, and there are definitely spam ways to do it. It is how the vast majority of bigger companies generate much of their revenue isn't through inbound leads. It's through outbound messaging, through email, cold call, or DMs on social media. And so I know there's I can't believe companies do that. They do it for a reason. It's just a volume game and it takes a lot of team and software to do it. So that's one aspect. And essentially what they're doing is, so it's one thing to call, it's one thing to email. The bigger part of it is how do you go find the list of leads? And this is where companies, if you want to get into this, you just go, literally Google, how do I find leads? And there are software lists that go pull people. So you can go like LinkedIn, you can use certain software to scrape job title, email, name, phone number. You get all of that collected and then you send it to a team to go call all those people. It's much more complicated than that in the sense that you want to work with a company that has their messaging down, their offer down. Otherwise, you're collecting a list, sending it to people if they don't have that down, it's not going to work and no one's going to be really satisfied. You're definitely not going to be probably continue to work together. However, on the outbound or the inbound side, there are really cool things like lead generation. You can focus on SEO. So SEO is one way where you write content on blogs to try to get more web traffic. What we're really doing is saying, hey, Google in that case, or whoever their domain or their, whatever search engine someone's going through, we're saying, hey, based on the content we put out there, can you get it more qualified at a better quality that then Google wants to rank as an authority higher, so we might get more traffic from the local searches. And so that's one way you might do lead generation. Two, a classic one is paid advertising. So that might be putting, everyone thinks of Facebook ads, but you could put it in the newspaper, radio ads, TV commercials, billboard ads, do Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Reddit allows you to put ads in there. Snapchat allows you to put ads in there. And what we're doing is putting a message in front of people and then seeing if they want to respond to it. So it's kind of sounds like outbound. The difference here is we're paying a platform and not just inviting ourselves to someone's front door. We're saying, hey, Facebook's allowed us, this other medium is allowing us to knock on the door. That's the difference of why it's considered inbound versus outbound. So if you're looking for that, right? So that's how, if you run an agency, obviously you need to master one of those skills in just one channel. You can make a 7-figure business out of any one of those channels: cold calling, cold emailing, cold DMs. You could do it through advertising. You could do it through SEO. If you're really curious, there's I don't know, there's probably 20 different ways I'm missing. Just Google what are all the ways that you can do lead generation. You'll get a whole list. Then if you're a company wanting to get into lead generation, then you just have to look at where's opportunity. One, you want to look at, hey, how does this company have reviews, reputation? What's the offer if they don't have reviews and reputation? Are they willing to kind of work on results or maybe even on a trial, right? Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is, how do we generate leads? And then what I found now is, if you're working with small business owners, it's really not enough to just do lead generation, because many of them haven't really gotten sales coaching. They don't know about profit margins. It's the stuff that you just don't get taught in school. And so you might be able to do a great job. I've worked with clients where on the lead generation side, knocked it out of the park. But after we spent time going into, well, why isn't this working? They never had sales training. So we were sending leads to someone who didn't know how to close, which it's fine. It's like, that's, it's something to think about though. If you want to get into this, what's the entire sales process that you're plugging yourself into on the lead generation side? So a lot of times this is where I've had to shift to consulting is, okay, I might have to teach some sales. I might have to teach some offer design in terms of like, hey, what we're doing now isn't profitable. Like, let's look through profitability here. So it's kind of a wide answer to that question there, but hopefully it gives people some insight and piques their curiosity of my advice is go Google. If any of that stuck with you, you're curious about it, go Google that specific thing. There's tons of great podcasts or interviews on each specific subject.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's a lot to take away from that there too. Like, one, we're not taught this stuff in healthcare schools, right? PT, OT, speech, MD, nursing, whatever. We just don't get taught this stuff because it's not part of our everyday job, so to speak, right? So it's a skill set that you would have to learn outside. And I had to do that. And that's, totally fine. Like, I think building your skill sets and layering your skill sets, eventually turns into a lot of good things. And at the very least, you learn enough so that you can outsource if you don't want to do that stuff, and I think that's become important too, is knowing enough to know who to hire and why. I think that becomes very important. And you also said another thing there too that was interesting, that we got to talk profitability at the end of the day. We've got to talk about what's working and what's not, and what's making money versus what's losing money. Otherwise, you can't run a business. It's going to run it into the ground. So I think that's a neat little pivot into what you're kind of working on now, which is a lot of the finance behind businesses and showing people how to help structure their finances and go through that. Talk to us a little bit about that and catch us up to where you're at now.
Yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. I do want to say, it just hit my mind, F Scott, if it's okay, is that even if you, like, let's say, you're probably listening to this because you're interested in a side hustle, or you're trying to create, different levels of income or new streams of income. If you're listening to this and you feel like you have no interest in any of that, if you're an employee, you're still beholden to lead generation. I can't stress this enough. If you want to make more money, the person who can bring in more customers, more clients, or keep customers and clients has all the leverage to negotiate for a higher pay raise, for, promotion. Like, people think like, well, I want to work at a hospital system because, I don't want to have to think about business stuff. Like, it sounds, for a lot of people, and for me when I was younger, like the idea that a hospital, I think we all kind of know now it's a business. Like, you get it's a business, but it doesn't feel like a traditional business. Here's the crazy thing. Do you know who the number one advertisers are in my city, Pittsburgh? The two biggest healthcare networks. Those are the two that spend the most money on advertising. It's usually billboards and like these huge, taking up huge spaces, TV commercials. They, especially to to new parents, right? Because if they can get their kids in the system right away, right? And so their way of doing lead gen is just different. It's more based on like relationship and about a good feeling rather than here's a cool offer kind of thing. But if you look at like where you can have leverage the fastest is if you are able to bring a business more customers, more clients, right? You have so much leverage in your ability to control your income. And so I think it's just really, I always like to tell people that because some people are like, I just don't want to get into business. It's like you work for one. Heck, even if you're a nonprofit, nonprofits have clients. Like you have to be able to get them clients to do this stuff. So it's, I think it's really interesting. I think a lot of times we look at this like, I don't want to go that route, or I hear people say, I don't want to. It seems so like, time consuming or whatever. It's like
Well,
it's reality.
layering any skill set on top of DPT, let's just say, is going to make
Yep.
you more attractive to any business or any potential employer moving forward,
Yep.
especially if it's outside of the realm of healthcare. You know.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So to go back to your original question, like what got us into or doing what I'm doing now, we do financial coaching. So I do two separate things. The primary thing that I do is I help co-run a business called CEO Finance Academy. And what we do is we help small business owners, usually doing like 300,000 a year to 5 million a year, help them understand their financial metrics better and help them make better decisions with their business. And so we got into this because we started actually a marketing agency. It was a marketing agency and consultancy. It was called Healthy Funnel, and we built our business to multiple six figures. We spent so much time to retain our clients, teaching them about how their marketing dollars in was leading to X amount of revenue back in. And we would have these conversations, and it was really interesting. It was a combination of that, and then two, us not really understanding our own business finances when we started. And so I have to give so much credit to my business partner, Alex Engar. If you're interested in personal finance, money stuff, go follow him on Facebook or wherever. Follow our YouTube channel, CEO Finance Academy. It's Alex's content. He is our financial guru. He went on a mission for like a year and a half, just figuring out business finance stuff for us, and eventually turned himself into a pretty solid expert on it. And we started sharing more and more about what we were learning about business finances, about money, about tracking, just business metrics. And it was, to our surprise, we had a lot of clients who were doing high six figures, seven figures, who started reaching out to us privately saying, hey, I'm so glad you guys are talking about this. I'm bringing in $700,000 this year, and I'm not paying myself even $5,000 a month. And, to us, I was like, wow, 700,000 a year. Like, you think you'd be like able to like move to Aruba. You'd be like amazing, right? When you're starting out, and you realize you can make a lot of money, but if you don't know how to keep much money, it can all go away. And so we started showing them what we were doing. We had enough people sort of interested that wanted to hire us on a consulting side to just help them go through their business finance stuff. They started referring people our way, and eventually we decided that it was something we were really aligned with. We felt more passionate about than the marketing agency side. And so that's what we do now. Sit down, we work with business owners one-on-one. We have two coaches now who sit down and do the financial coaching with owners, essentially train them into being better financial decision makers, essentially turning them into the CFO that you typically don't hire until you're at like 5 to 10 million a year. And the problem is most businesses are relying on their accountants and bookkeepers to try to play that role, but that's not the role they're meant to play. They're meant to be, I like to think of, there are accountants and bookkeepers who can, but many of them play the role of a scorecard keeper, right? It's like, hey, here's the scorecard. Here's where you're at. Accountants help you just how to reduce your, if you're playing golf, how to lower your score, right? That's really what, accountants are mainly meant to do. But then it's, well, what do I do then? How do I make decisions? How can I afford to hire? Can I afford to pay for a lead? Can I afford to pay for outsourcing lead generation? How do I make those decisions? And so that's what we do now. It's been an absolute blast. And on the side, I still do consulting for lead generation, mainly for PT clinics. But yeah, that's what we do now. It's been a blast. It's been super eye-opening, and super rewarding, like to just see people be able to pay themselves what they feel like they're worth, being able to take time off for vacations. Like, yeah, we just really believe small business ownership is our mission. The truth is our mission is that we really do believe that small business ownership is one of the greatest ways to provide opportunities in communities, allows for people to create jobs if they know how to do it right. And if we can do that, We're allowing more people to have jobs, to stay employed, which we really think makes communities better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a great way to scale from side hustle to now full time, thing, right? I mean, any of these, if done right, can be really lucrative,
Oh, yeah.
and I love the fact too that what you guys have done is something that I always try to teach my mentees is like, hey, look, you've got to create a lifestyle. You've got to create what you want, how you want to live, and then the business can fit into that. Like you shouldn't create the business, to have the lifestyle. You have to have the lifestyle first and then see where the business fits into it. And I think that's a tough distinction that a lot of people don't get, because working 80 hours a week and working harder and trying to work smarter and burning yourself out is not the answer. Like it's not going to lead to more money, and it doesn't matter if you're working 80 hours a week and you're dead. The money doesn't really matter. It just really does take some pause and some reflection and some critical thinking about, all right, what are my goals here? How can I best meet those goals? And then once I've gotten into a flow state and everything's kind of established, what are the metrics I need to look at to keep it running, keep it flowing? And so I love that take on it. What are some takeaways or some things to look for if you're a small business owner and you're kind of examining your finances?
Yeah, I think the first telltale sign is, are you paying yourself a consistent salary? And I know it's hard for businesses that are just starting out. And are you reverse engineering the rest of your metrics to meet that goal? I think we see so many, we just run into so many small business owners who think about everyone but themselves. And while it's a noble thing, right, it feels very selfless. At the end of the day, everyone else is dependent on you being able to meet your goals in the business, because you're the one who drives the ship. And if the ship's not going anywhere, other people might be swimming happily next to you, but they don't know where they're going, right? Like it could all end if you're not able to meet your goals. And so we see so many people who are not prioritizing their personal financial goal. And I think especially if you're from healthcare, that's like secondary to most of us. It's not a normal thought to have. And it's a mindset shift of, the better that I do, the more opportunities I can provide for others, not the other way around. And I get that's a shock to a lot of people, but if you're going into business, you're not playing the game of, it is a game of profit. Profit is your tool to continue to grow, to invest, to help other people. And if you're not building around that, it's like playing, I don't know, baseball and trying to optimize for steals. It's like, it's great, man. You could be the best person to steal bases, but like if you lose every game, you're probably not going to have a job. Like the guy, you can't really just have the skill set of stealing bases. It's not Deion Sanders, type of game anymore where you could like, that's all you do. Like you have to be able to prioritize for winning, right? I wouldn't want to root for a team who has the best person who steals bases if they go 0 and 162. Be like, cool, that's really great, but it sucks to watch, man. In fact, probably like we need a lot of help. And and the consequence of that is, okay, you lose a lot of games. The consequence in business is you go out, or you owe people money, or you're in debt, and that plays a role into your personal well-being. We see that bleed over into relationships, and so it's something that I just see really isn't. I feel like it's stigmatized of like to think about what you want and what you need and how to reverse engineer for that. So that's the easiest one. The second one is people aren't organizing their finances on a weekly to monthly basis and being disciplined about it, meaning that all of their money is being funneled into one or two accounts, and they don't know when their next expense is going to hit. They couldn't tell you at any time how much available cash flow is in their business. Their checking account might say $10,000, but they don't know when the next like $4,000 expense is going to come out. And aren't saving for taxes. So they're just kind of on a whim. Like I see a lot of small businesses hoping that they just break even so they don't owe taxes, which to me is mind boggling. Of like, the whole goal of a business is to be able to pay yourself what you want. And yeah, taxes are a part of it, but you just reverse engineer around that. So there's kind of two things I see most common in small businesses. As you get over kind of the multiple hundreds of thousands a year, it starts to change a little bit of the bigger problems, but it's kind of what we see in the starting out.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's one of those things where people say, oh, well, what if my business is nonprofit? What if I want to get, volunteer time and do pro bono stuff? It's like, great. You still need money to do that, right? You need to make more so that you can give more of yourself and your time. And the more of profit you make, the more money you have, that gives you more time freedom to then choose to use it however you want.
Right.
And so we
Agreed.
do need to be profitable. We need to make money. Profit is
I
not a
think,
bad thing. It's a tool.
yeah, I think what's fascinating about that is I think more people should do that so they can find out if they really end up doing it. Because a lot of people say that, and then if they make money, they end up not doing that thing. And it's like, did you
Yeah.
did you really want to, like, what were your true intentions there? Like what was
Right.
going on? I think that's fascinating, if because people are like, well, I want to, and people can't afford my services, I'll work with them pro bono. It's like, well, go work with people who can afford to pay you, free up your time, enough that you can free up time and then go help those people pro bono. The amount of people that don't end up then helping people with pro bono is fascinating to
Yeah.
me.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, you're only doing because you don't value yourself, for example.
Yeah, it's a noble cause, but like, for me, it goes back to like when I was starting my EDD, and we do small acts of community service here and there, and I wanted to show my kids that, like, hey, this is why we do community service. It's a good thing to do. It's good to give back to your community.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to bleed over into my professional life too. So when I did my dissertation, I examined service-based learning and why more PT schools weren't doing it, right? Because it's a great fit for the field of physical therapy. Well, move that ahead like a bunch more, and it's like, oh, by the way, I do have a mobile physical therapy practice, and I do make money, and when I have free time, I do treat elderly patients pro bono because I don't want to deal with a lot of the insurance. I don't want to deal with Medicare. I'll just treat local,
Yep.
people, especially in my church community, that need help, right?
Yep.
I do it when I can. The problem has become now working a full 9 to 5, working a side gig and a side hustle, and then having the kids and running them all over town. I'm running out of time now.
Yep.
So for me, where I used to be able to do a lot of that stuff, I don't have the time. So the more money I can make, the more I can make donations to places that I see,
Yep.
as something I want to give to, something that's important to me.
Yep.
I could have, back in the day, I could give time. I had time. Now I don't have as much time, so it's more valuable to me. So the money becomes the tool in which I can give and do charitable donations that way.
Yeah.
And you pick the way you want to do service, but
Yeah.
like you said, at the end of the day, when you're making a lot of money, it's hard to walk away from that and then go, use your free time for pro bono stuff. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
choose.
Yeah, I think you can do both. I think it's just one
Absolutely.
of those where, like you said, it's priorities. I think what's interesting is the amount of people who, um, yeah, it's just one of those things where a lot of people say that's what they want to do because it feels good to them in the moment. But then if you could give them the opportunity, how many of them wouldn't do that? It's just fascinating because it's sort of a catch-22. But
Yeah. Well,
I love that you did that. I love that you did that. Yeah.
I look at it even in the profitable business world. I had
Yeah.
two kind of businesses where I had mobile PT that was making $200 an hour. And then I had consulting for injury prevention or mitigation, right? For workman's comp type companies to lower their workman's comp costs, where I could consult at $1,500 an hour, right? Well, now it becomes a matter of like, well, which one of those do I really want to do? Like, yeah, I could do patient care on a one-to-one model and make my $200, which is a great rate for a physical therapist. Or I could use my knowledge and education to now educate 30 people in a company on how not to get injured and how to like keep a happy, healthy workplace
Yep.
and make $1,500 an hour, right? So now, again, it just goes back to, like you said, prioritizing and seeing what really works for you and what drives you and what's going to free up more of your time or
Yeah.
financial freedom.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Will, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, man, and for coming on and educating the audience on everything from lead gen to finances. Where can people reach out to you and find you if they have questions or follow up or just want to kind of see what you're working on in the finance world?
Yeah. First off, just thanks for having me, F Scott. I obviously appreciate it, man. And yeah, if anyone wants to learn about us, you can, if you're interested in me, you can find me on Instagram, Will Boyd 4, at Will Boyd 4. If you're interested in what we're doing with CEO Finance Academy, you can go to www.ceofinanceacademy.com.
Great.
If you want to email me, it's will@ceofinanceacademy.com, and usually an open book and willing to help.
Yeah, we'll drop all those links in the show notes so it's easy for everybody to find. Will, always a pleasure, man. I appreciate you, and thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely.